It's a new episode of Bazaar. I'm your host Sid, and today I'm going to talk about a company operating in the pharma space. I'm fascinated by this sector because I never really understood the mechanics of it. Never understood it deeply, and I spent a lot of time reading about the industry and its different players. I spent like, let's say, 3 or 4 days to really understand how this industry works, and this is what I've understood. So there are four broad categories in the pharma industry. First are your API manufacturers, like the companies that make the molecule that go inside the drug. Second are your formulators, like the ones who use the molecules, the APIs, and convert it into the final product, like your tablets, syrups, etc. Right. Um, Third, you have companies that are engaged purely in research and contract manufacturing. Like these guys do the research, they do the contract manufacturing, but they don't own the drug, right? And these companies work closely with formulators, right? And finally, you have the distributors who take the final product from the formulators and sell it in the market, right? So today I'm going to talk about a company called Divi Labs, which is a pharma company I admire, which is an API manufacturer. Like it makes molecules, and it has two world-class manufacturing facilities, and it is one of the largest API manufacturers in the world, not in India, in the world. And since Divi's makes APIs, or in simple terms, molecules that go inside the drugs, it sells these to formulators, right? But even in formulators, you have two categories, right? First are the innovator companies, like the ones who spend money on research and create a new drug from scratch. Like, they create a new drug from scratch, they spend a lot of money on it, and there's no guarantee that it'll pan out, right? But once it pans out, they patent it, right? Second class of formulators are the generic formulators who wait for the patent of the innovator companies to expire to make the generic drugs. So you must have like heard that there is a paracetamol of five different companies. All of them are generic drugs because they waited for the patent to expire. Now, Divi's caters to both generic formulators and innovator companies. And let's understand the business a little. So, from a business perspective, Divi's has three segments. So, the first segment is generic APIs, where it makes molecules that are sold to generic formulation companies. It has a portfolio of 30 generic APIs and has got 10 more APIs in the pipeline. Now, this segment, generic APIs, contributes around 47% of revenues. The second segment is custom synthesis, where Divi's makes APIs for the innovator companies, and it counts big players, big pharma players like GSK, Sanofi, Merck as its clients. So, this segment contributes 45% of total sales and is a high margin segment because obviously, custom synthesis and anything custom made would command a premium, right? Because you have to do more research, takes more time, more engineering bandwidth, etc. So, uh, these are the two segments which are contributing major chunk of the revenues. And the third segment, which is a recent one, is called nutraceuticals, which go into the food and dietary supplement industry. So this segment contributes 8% of the total sales. Now, is Divi's a good business, right? What makes a good business, and should you consider Divi's in your watch list or in your buy list? So let's take a look at some of the positives. So first and most importantly, like at least for me, I think what I look at is the operating margin. So Divi's has the highest operating margin for an API player in India. Like, making molecules is a commodity business. Anyone can, mix things and make molecules. And that's like, that's what a commodity is, right? But our Divi's has enjoyed margins in the range of 27 to 35% over the years. And you would normally ask, how have they done it, right? Well, they make APIs that involve complex chemistry, which has less competition. Second, it has built good relationships with its customers because it doesn't compete with them, right? Sometimes what happens is that API manufacturers also forward integrate and become formulators, but Divi's does not compete with its clients, and it is an API exclusive manufacturer. So any formulator that comes, right, they know that okay, Divi's is not going to compete with me, and they give them more business, right? Third thing is that custom synthesis, which is a high margin business, contributes significantly to revenues, helping to keep the operating margins up. Also, it derives 90% of revenues from exports, which are generally price insensitive markets. So, exports are the bread and butter of the Indian pharma industry, and especially exports to the US. Like, if a company has a lot of exports to US, that's a good sign. So, Divi's was smart. The fourth positive point is that it has manufacturing plants that are multi-purpose, which means that it can be used to produce multiple molecules and operate at full capacity. So, it can smartly use its factories, and it is also in the process of setting up another plant which should be operational by the end of next year. And this new plant will be used to make KSMs, intermediates, and nutraceuticals. Now, nutraceuticals doesn't have a lot of players globally, and is a market which is growing very quickly. Food supplements, especially, right? And a few other things which are working out for Divi's is that it is entering the contrast media API business. Now, contrast media are substances that are injected orally into the body of humans to highlight organs during MRIs, CT scans, X-rays, etc. And again, this sector does not have a lot of players and is a big opportunity for Divi's to capture. It requires a lot of research development. Not everyone can do it. You need big money for it, and Divi's has been able to make a stronghold in the contrast media API business. And finally, I think Divi's is a good play on the China plus one strategy. So a lot of the innovator companies post COVID want to shuffle their supply chains, and India is looking very attractive right now. So a lot of positives for the company. I've covered these in more detail in my blog, which you can read if you want to dive deeper into the company. And with that, let's also take a look at some of the risks in the business. So, which is most important thing is to look at what are the risks in the business, and do they outweigh the pros, right? So the first one is that the top 5 products of Divi's contribute 46% to total revenues, and the top 5 customers contribute 41% to total revenues. So there's a lot of product concentration, customer concentration, which has been going down. Like uh, any drop in demand in the top 5 products or top 5 customers could significantly impact the business. But the good thing is that Divi's has been gradually reducing this concentration. So over the years, 2 years back, this number would be 60%. It used to derive like 60% from its top 5 products. Now that has gone down to 46. So that's a good sign, but still, something to keep in mind if you're looking to invest in the business. Second, which is a little concerning, is that even though the operating margins are high, they have been declining over the years. Now, that's not a trend you want to see as an investor, right? So how could this be justified is that maybe the clients are bargaining hard, or maybe the raw material prices are increasing. But I would say, like, this is something you should keep a watch on, because if the margins keep declining in the future, that would be a major point of concern, right? And one more thing is that since Divi's operates its facilities at full capacity, there's a lot of inventory buildup. So what it does is it does not keep its factories idle. It's operating at full capacity. So even if there is no demand, it's just building up on inventory, and this puts a pressure on cash flows and working capital. And since 90% of business comes from exports, the company could be subject to forex fluctuation risks or a slowdown in those economies which is currently underway. So if it builds up the inventory and is not able to sell, that could put pressure on cash flows. And I think lastly, which is a common point, is that the pharma industry is subject to a lot of regulatory risks, and Divi's is no exception. Any adverse regulation against Divi's in the future could harm the business, right? Could have an adverse effect. Like if it has a drug in the pipeline, it does not get approved by US FDA, which is like one of the most important regulators in the pharma industry, that could have a effect on the stock price as well. So keep in mind these risks. And to conclude, I would just like to summarize. I think Divi's is one of the best run companies in API manufacturing. It has two world-class manufacturing facilities. One is on the way. They're creating one more facility. It has a great product portfolio, good clients, big clients in the pharma industry. It has the best operating margin compared to its peers, and it is also adding new capacity to capture the nutraceutical space, which is it is not many players are there in this. So it is also getting into the contrast media API market, which is a big opportunity with few players. Customer concentration is going down, and the China plus one strategy could work in its favor since it doesn't compete with its customers, right? The above points is the reason why the company is trading at a PE of 71 times. It's not cheap, it's quite expensive. It has a market cap of 95,000 crore, and I think the stock is expensive. Yeah, and there's a reason for it to be expensive because it is doing some good stuff. So I would say definitely worth keeping in your watch list, and I would say you could make moves if the stock drops from here. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. As always, do your own research before you buy or sell any stocks or securities. I'm not an investment advisor, but someone who wants to bring opportunities to your attention, which I will keep doing. So take care, and I'll catch you in the next episode.